VidDevo Bible, 7 minutes in the Word of God. Genesis chapter 1, verse 22. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. God blessed them, and God said. And because God said it, we listen. When God speaks, it is assumed that we would pay attention. And because we pay attention, we listen more acutely. We pay a little more special focus so that we would remember and observe to hear and to see and to record those things that God has said, even as He has done so for us in Genesis chapter 1, verse 22, when He said, God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. We have it recorded for us because God said it. And because God said it, He spoke it to those that would remember for us those things that God had said. And as they told them to their children, they were recorded to us from those verbal communications that were shared one to another until it was recorded in the Word as it is written for us today. As we read it, we hear what God had said. As we know what God had said, there is no debate about whether or not God said it. It is obvious this is what God said in Genesis 1:22. God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. There are those that would say to listen to and hearken to those that interpret what God has said. There are those that say that we should understand by changing what God has said. There are those that would explain the reasoning behind why we must look at some other way of understanding the languages that God has said. And yet, we have written here, as easy as it is for anyone to understand, the simplicity and the sincerity with which God is communicating to us in Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 22, when He says, And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. There's no doubt that God blessed them. He says so. There's no doubt as to what God said. Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. Those simple things, those factual truths, that reality of what God has said is so simple that I can tell a little child, I can tell an old adult, I can tell a grandfather, I can tell a grandmother, I can tell a mother, I can tell a father, I can tell anyone, anywhere, anytime what God has said, what God has done, whom God has blessed, and how God has blessed. God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth, in Genesis chapter 1 of verse 22. That's so simple. That's so easy. It doesn't need anyone to argue about. There's no argument possible. It doesn't need anyone to explain it about. It's very obvious what it means. It means what it says, and God blessed them. That's what it says, and God blessed them by saying, and what He said is recorded for us, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. Because God blessed them, that's what they did, because He said it. And when we know that God said it, we should listen. And so at VidDevo Bible, we just listen to what God said. We don't have to add some commentary and make comments on it. We don't have to change it or rearrange it. We don't have to have some other interpretation. We just have to listen and recognize that God said in Genesis chapter 1 of verse 22, And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. it doesn't make any difference what you think, because what God said is right here. What God has spoken, we have for us. What God has determined we should know, God has said, and that's what we know. If you think you know more than God, then you add to the Word of God. If you think you are God, then you take from the Word of God. But if you accept what God has said, then you know for a fact that God said in Genesis chapter 1, verse 22, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. No one can take away the Word of God from you. It is as obvious and it is overly blunt and simple and visible as the sunshine that rises every day and as the moon and the stars that come by night. If God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters in the seas and let fowl multiply in the earth, then if today we have the seas full of, if today we have the waters in the seas multiplying and being fruitful, those that are in them, and the fowl are multiplying in the earth, then we know that there is obviously what God has said, God has done. And so in verse 22 of chapter 1 of Genesis, God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth in the seas and let fowl multiply in the earth, is obvious to us because we can see it today, even as he said it then. So there's no question that you have heard the Word of God. You have heard the Word that God has spoken. You know that God has said this in verse 22 of Genesis chapter 1, that God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth, because it is done and because it is so. And that's why in VidDevoBible, you have heard in 7 minutes the Word of God as God has related it to you today.